I wanted to talk about Kodak's coffee and cameras. The Kodak Film Lab in Atlanta, Georgia hosts workshops and a regular event called Coffee and Cameras. And it's at the Kodak Lab. And I attended last Sunday. I've been meaning to go. There's usually some coffee and donuts, which they had outside, and everybody kind of, whoever's there kind of chit chats and meets each other. We were given a tour of the lab, which was very cool. There's like a room where they do their workshops and where they held the speaker part, which I'll get to in a second. But then they also took us into the back and actually showed us the machines where the film is processed. So they took us to the very, very back, which is where the exposed film that hasn't been developed yet is taken off the reels and put through the bath and the fixer and all of that stuff. And I have never developed film, so I don't know all the proper terminology, but I think it's like wash, fixer, developer. I'm gonna get this all out of order, but hopefully in the future I will have a better understanding of the process of film, and I might even try to do some developing either still or film photography myself. But anyway, once the film has been developed, it sort of leaves the dark space. But in the dark space, there's absolutely no light at all. In fact, you go down this really not super long. It's actually not that long. I feel like I'm making this, I'm being a little dramatic here, but it sort of felt like when you're, okay, let me put it this way. When I was in my 20s, I went on a girls' trip to Panama City, and we went to this really DIY, incredibly just like side of the road haunted house. It was the most terrifying place I've ever been to in my life. Anyway, a lot of it was like dark hallways where you couldn't see, and there's like things flying, like sort of like brushing against your face. It was horrifying. Anyway, not to be incredibly dramatic, but when you're going to the back where they actually take the exposed film off of the reels and prepare it to go through the machine, there's this hallway that's separated by several black curtains, and it's completely dark. We did have the light on back there because he was showing us the machine, but in that room there's absolutely no light, no windows, and the guy that does the developing does everything completely just by the feel, just by muscle memory and feeling, which is completely wild to me. Anyway, so he showed us the machine. We were able to get a real close look at it. Then it kind of passes through this hole in the wall as it continues through the machine to where there's actually some light. Not to get all writery on us, but I felt like this incredible metaphor of the film, like after it's developing, sort of passing like through this portal into the light where it's now like being washed and dried and all of that stuff. Anyway, so we see sort of what happens on the back end, which is of course that it gets washed again and then, dried before being rolled onto the reels of developed film. Anyway, so that was really cool. And those machines are, he said that they are over 40 years old, which means they're my age. So it was really neat to get a look into that. And so I would say if you're in the Atlanta area and you've been thinking about going to this Kodak meetup, Coffee and Cameras, it's completely free. It's just a couple of hours on a Sunday morning. Absolutely go. It was very cool. So after that, there was a speaker. There was a filmmaker there who was shooting a short film on 35 millimeter. And so, and this is sort of the typical thing, is that there'll be like kind of the coffee part and I guess the tour, and then you'll sit down and there'll be some kind of speaker. And so that was really great. We got to see some pieces of the she's sort of shooting a proof of concept to get funding for the rest of the feature. But it was really cool to see some of the footage that she had shot, as well as her process, and talking with her about how she got to where she is and why she's shooting on film as opposed to digital, and where did she rent the cameras. And so it was, the whole sort of purpose was like, here is a scrappy indie filmmaker who is, making a short film chose to shoot on film, and you can do it too. And so that was great. Obviously, one of the big purposes of meetups is to encourage people to continue to shoot on film and to not be intimidated by it. And obviously, like, we can't ignore there are additional costs in developing, processing, and scanning film that don't exist with the digital. But I mean, I can't disagree that the film had a really particular look, and that because her film is about something that's very personal and has to do with her family history, and it's set in the past, like, it definitely, the shooting on film, it really added to the storytelling to have that 35 millimeter look. Then he passed around some 16 millimeter magazines and some rolls of film, and so we talked a little bit about that, and I got to like hold the magazine and try to open it, and I was having a little trouble getting it open, and somebody had to help me with it. There is also at the very end, they do teach people how to load 16 millimeter cameras. Unfortunately, I was not able to stay for that part where you learn how to load the 16 millimeter camera. I have, in film school, shot on a 16 millimeter Bolex before, and I never once learned how to use a camera, but I feel like that's a whole separate topic that I'll cover at another time. But I would love to get past the hurdle and the I guess the anxiety I feel about my inability to load a 16 millimeter camera. I would love to get past that. So all in all, really great experience. I'm definitely gonna go back to another event in the future, and hopefully get to load a 16 millimeter camera this time. But if you're in the Atlanta area, Kodak Film Lab has a Facebook group, or a Facebook page, I would say. They have a Facebook page where they usually post this event, Coffee and Cameras. It was super cool. It was a couple of hours of my time, and it was absolutely worth it. So go check it out.